Tales from My Childhood, written by Roald Dahl, Part 7. In September 1925, when I was just 9, I set out on the first great adventure of my life, that is, boarding school. My mother had chosen for me a preparatory school in a part of England which was as near as it could possibly be to our home in South Wales, and it was called St. Peter's. The full postal address was St. Peter's School, Weston super Mare, Somerset. Weston super Mare is a slightly seedy seaside resort with a vast sandy beach, a tremendous long pier, an esplanade running along the seafront, a clutter of hotels and boarding houses, and about 10,000 little shops selling buckets and spades and sticks of rock and ice creams. It lies almost directly across the Bristol Channel from Cardiff, and on a clear day you can stand on the esplanade at Weston and look across the 15 or so miles of water and see the coast of Wales lying pale and milky on the horizon. In those days, the easiest way to travel from Cardiff to Weston-super-Mare was by boat. Those boats were beautiful. They were paddle steamers with gigantic swishing paddle wheels on their flanks, and the wheels made the most terrific noise as they sloshed and churned through the water. On the first day of my first term, I set out by taxi in the afternoon with my mother to catch the paddle steamer from Cardiff Docks to Weston-super-Mare. Every piece of clothing I wore was brand new and had my name on it. I wore black shoes, grey woolen stockings with blue turnovers, grey flannel shorts, a grey shirt, a red tie, a grey flannel blazer with the blue school crest on the breast pocket, and a grey school cap with the same crest just above the peak. Into the taxi that was taking us to the docks went my brand new trunk and my brand new tuck box, and both had Ardhal painted on them in black. A tuck box is a small pine wood trunk which is very strongly made, and no boy has ever gone as a boarder to an English preparatory school without one. It is his own secret storehouse, as secret as a lady's handbag, and there is an unwritten law that no other boy, no teacher, not even the headmaster himself has the right to pry into the contents of your tuck box. The owner has the key in his pocket, and that is where it stays. At St. Peter's, the tuck boxes were ranged shoulder to shoulder, all around the four walls of the changing room, and your own tuck box stood directly below the peg on which you hung your game's clothes. A tuck box, as the name implies, is a box in which you store your tuck. At preparatory school in those days, a parcel of tuck was sent once a week by anxious mothers to their ravenous little sons, and an average tuck box would probably contain, at almost any time, half a homemade currant cake, a packet of squashed fly biscuits, a couple of oranges, an apple, a banana, a pot of strawberry jam or marmite, a bar of chocolate, a bag of licorice, all sorts, and a tin of Bassett's lemonade powder. An English school in those days was purely a money making business owned and operated by the headmaster. It suited him, therefore, to give the boys as little food as possible himself and to encourage the parents in various cunning ways to feed their offspring by parcel post from home. By all means, my dear Mrs. Dahl, do send your boy some little treats now and again, he would say. Perhaps a few oranges and apple once a week. Fruit was a very expensive, and a nice currant cake, a large currant cake perhaps because small boys have large appetites, do they not? Ha 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 ha. Yes, yes, as often as you like. More than once a week if you wish. Of course, he will be getting plenty of good food here, the best there is, but it never tastes quite the same as home cooking, does it? I am sure you wouldn't want him to be the only one who does not get a lovely parcel from home every week. As well as a tuck box would also contain all manner of treasure such as a magnet, a pocket knife, a compass, a ball of string, a clockwork racing car, half a dozen lead soldiers, a box of conjuring tricks, some twiddly winks, a Mexican jumping bean, a catapult, some foreign stamps, a couple of stink bombs, and I remember one boy called Arkel who drilled an air hole in the lid of his tuck box and kept a pet frog in there which he fed on slugs. So off we set, my mother and I, and my trunk and my tuck box, and we boarded the paddle steamer and went swooshing across the Bristol Channel in a shower of spray. I liked that part of it, but I began to grow apprehensive as I disembarked onto the pier at Weston super and watched my trunk and tuck box being loaded into an English taxi which would drive us to St. Peter's. I had absolutely no idea what was in store for me. I had never spent a single night away from our large family before. St. Peter's was on a hill above the town. It was a long, three-storied stone building that looked rather like a private lunatic asylum, and in front of it lay the playing fields with their three football pitches. One third of the building was reserved for the headmaster and his family. The rest of it housed the boys, about 150 of them altogether, if I remember rightly. As we got out of the taxi, I saw the whole driveway abuzzel with small boys and their parents and their trunks and their tuck boxes, and a man I took to be the headmaster was swimming around among them, shaking everybody by the hand. I have already told you that all headmasters are giants, and this one was no exception. He advanced upon my mother and shook her by the hand. Then he shook me by the hand, and as he did so, he gave me the kind of flashing grin a shark might give to a small fish just before he gobbles it up. One of his front teeth, I noticed, was edged all the way round with gold, and his hair was slicked down with so much hair cream that it glistened like butter. Right? He said to me. Off you go and report to the matron. And to my mother he said briskly, Goodbye, Mrs. Dahal. I shouldn't linger if I were you. We will look after him. My mother got the message. She kissed me on the cheek and said goodbye and climbed right back into the taxi. The headmaster moved away to another group, and I was left standing there beside my brand new trunk and my brand new tuck box. I began to cry. At St. Peter's, Sunday morning was letter writing time. At 9 o'clock, the whole school had to go to their desks and spend 1 hour writing a letter home to their parents. At 10:15, we put on our caps and coats and formed up outside the school in a long crocodile and marched a couple of miles down into Western Supermare for church, and we didn't get back until lunchtime. Church going never became a habit with me. Letter writing did. Here is the very first letter I wrote home from St. Peter's. From that very first Sunday at St. Peter's until the day my mother died 32 years later, I wrote to her once a week, sometimes more often, whenever I was away from home. I wrote to her every week from St. Peter's and every week from my next school, Repton, and every week from Dar es Salaam in East Africa, where I went on my first job after leaving school, and then every week during the war from Kenya and Iraq and Egypt when I was flying with the Royal Air Force. My mother, for her part, kept every one of these letters, binding them carefully in neat bundles with green tape, but this was her own secret. She never told me she was doing it. In 1967, when she knew she was dying, I was in hospital in Oxford having a serious operation on my spine, and I was unable to write to her. So she had a telephone specially installed beside her bed in order that she might have one last conversation with me. She didn't tell me she was dying, nor did anyone else for that matter, because I was in a fairly serious condition myself at the time. She simply asked me how I was and hoped I would get better soon and sent me her love. I had no idea that she would die the next day, but she knew all right and she wanted to reach out and speak to me for the last time. When I recovered and went home, I was given this vast collection of my letters, all so neatly bound with green tape, more than 600 of them altogether, dating from 1925 to 1945, each one in its original envelope with the old stamps still on them. I'm awfully lucky to have something like this to refer to in my old age. Letter writing was a serious business at St. Peter's. It was as much a lesson in spelling and punctuation as anything else because the headmaster would patrol the classrooms all through the sessions, peering over our shoulders to read what we were writing and to point out our mistakes. But that, I am quite sure, was not the main reason for his interest. He was there to make sure that we said nothing horrid about his school. There was no way, therefore, that we could ever complain to our parents about anything during term time. If we thought the food was lousy, or if we hated a certain master, or if we had been thrashed for something we did not do, we never dared to say so in our letters. In fact, we often went the other way. In order to please the dangerous headmaster who was leaning over our shoulders and reading what we had written, we would say splendid things about the school and go on about how lovely the masters were. Mind you, the headmaster was a clever fellow. He did not want our parents to think that those letters of ours were censored in this way, and therefore he never allowed us to correct a spelling mistake in the letter itself. If, for example, I had written, last Tuesday night we had a lecture, he would say, don't you know how to spell night? Yes, sir, Knight. That is the other kind of night, you idiot. Which kind, sir? I don't understand. The one in shining armor, the man on horseback. How do you spell Tuesday night? I am quite not sure, sir. It is Night, night. Boy, night. Stay in and write it out for me 50 times this afternoon. No, don't change it in the letter. You don't want to make it any messier than it is. It must go as you wrote it. Thus, the unsuspecting parents received in this subtle way the impression that your letter had never been seen or censored or corrected by anyone. Thank you very much.